Hi, I'm Jeff Cook, and this is Backyard Basics. This month we're going to touch on a subject that I probably should have hit on earlier in the year as people are getting ready to plant gardens, as people are getting their yards are greening up, they're starting to fertilize, and they're starting to see what we always see in Georgia, pests. We see diseases, we see insects, we see bacteria. We have a great environment for growing all sorts of things. We also have a great environment for growing all sorts of pests to feed on those things prior to us being able to enjoy them. One key aspect of pesticide safety is the pesticide label. A lot of times when people call me asking about what to use, I actually refer to these pesticide labels. Pesticide label can be found on the front of any pesticide that you purchase anywhere, whether it's restricted use or whether it's a non-restricted use pesticide. It's going to have a label of some sort. This is off of a fungicide. It's for peanuts and all kinds of vegetables. It's got about 30 pages. You look at a Roundup label. It's a pretty large book, but it talks about the use of these pesticides on every crop that it's labeled for, that it's registered to be used on. That's the first thing I think you should know about a pesticide label. You should always read it to see if it's actually labeled, for one, the pest that you're trying to control, and two, on the commodity, on the vegetable, on the turf grass or the ornamental that you're trying to protect. If it's not, if that actual commodity is not on the list, even if the pest is on the list, then it's actually off-label usage, and that's a federal offense. The label is the law, like we tell people, so you should always follow the label. Another thing on the label, say you've got your pesticide, you got your insecticide that you're going to use in your garden. You know that you can use it on peas. You know that it's to control a certain pest, whether it's aphids, whether it's cowpea, cucurlio, whatever it is. You know that it's labeled. You know that you can use it. Another important thing that you need to know is how long before you can go back in there and pick the vegetable. There's going to be different pre-harvest intervals, or PHI. There's going to be a different pre-harvest interval for all crops that pesticides are labeled for. And what you will find, if you really get to looking, is a lot of these pesticides, when they're labeled on a high-dollar crop, say like something that's high-dollar, tomatoes, peppers, things like that, watermelons, the pre-harvest interval might be fairly short. But it's something like that we mainly only grow in the South, like something like peas. A lot of times the pre-harvest interval for peas is a lot longer than it would be for your tomatoes, for squash, for leafy greens, things like that. Things that you see coming more at larger vegetable commodities that are coming to the marketplace. Other than that, there's also everybody's concerned with bees and other non-target pests. There's always environmental impacts that are in the front couple lines of this that tells you whether it's toxic to bees, whether it's toxic to aquatic invertebrates, and it gives you all kinds of the safety precautions if you get it in your eyes, if you inhale it, if you get it on your skin. One thing I will say, most of the pesticides that homeowners are using are very safe. They have low persistence in the environment. The biggest thing you can do to protect yourself, other than reading the label, is wear gloves. When you're mixing, when you're filling up your sprayer, when you're mixing, and when you're handling a pesticide, since it is a concentrated pesticide, you should always wear gloves, because that's where 99% of the exposure to pesticides, anybody using them, comes from. Not much is really going to, your eyes, face, you're not in real danger when you're using small quantities at the house, getting contact that way or exposure that way. But your hands, where you're picking things up, where you're touching things, where you're touching, spray equipment, all those things can come into contact with pesticides and cause the exposure, and that risk that increases your risk of any kind of sickness or any kind of problems down the road. The other really big thing that's important when it comes to pesticide safety is calibration. Calibration of your equipment is very, very important. I don't care if you are calibrating this huge highboy sprayer behind me, or if you're calibrating, your backpack sprayer. Calibrating your equipment is very important, so that one, how much water you're putting out per acre, and most importantly, so you know how much chemical you're applying to a certain area. Most of the time, like this label will have all the recommendations are labeled are in ounces per acre. And as you get to some of these newer chemistries that we're using, some of the older stuff we used to put a quart, 2 quarts, 3 quarts out per gallon, per acre. When you're talking about large quantities like that, the margin for error is a lot less. You have a lot less, you can, it's harder for you to mess up, let's just say that. Now you look at products that we're using these days where you're putting out 1/4 of an ounce, 1/10 of an ounce per acre. You think about trying to spread 1/10 of an ounce of something out over a whole acre. If your calibration is off by a gallon or two, then you are putting out either way too much or way too little. Not only is that off label, it can also be extremely expensive. If you think about the cost of some of these chemicals, if you put out too little, you spent the money to put it out, you spent the time to put it out, and you're not going to control the target pest. If you put out just a little bit too much, you've wasted money there because you put out more than you needed to. You probably controlled the target pest, but you might cause other environmental issues. You might actually kill things you didn't want to kill. A good example are some herbicides that we use in turf grass. There's low use rates. You get just a little bit above that use rate and you can yellow up some grass, you can kill grass. So we need to be careful with how we do that and how we calibrate and knowing how much we're putting out. So we're going to go into some pretty detail. We're going to go out to a field and get some distance so we can show you how to do this right. And I'm going to show you how to do calibration on a backpack sprayer. And I'll just, before we get into calibration, to me would recommend a backpack sprayer if you're doing any kind of major gardening, if you got any kind of major spraying you have to do, just because you can pump it as you go, you can keep a constant pressure, so that helps you keep that constant calibration as you're spraying throughout your yard, your garden, wherever you are applying pesticides. All right, so the first thing we need to figure out when we're calibrating a sprayer is we need to figure out, how many gallons of water we're spraying. So we need to figure out either our spray width, if we're using a single nozzle like this on this backpack sprayer, or if we were using a boom sprayer like we saw earlier, you would measure your nozzle spacing. You take that nozzle spacing or your spray width, and then we use this handy dandy boom sprayer calibration card that University of Georgia provides, that you can also be found in our pest control manuals, our management handbooks. You can use this to figure out a distance to travel, which is what we're going to do next. But first of all, I've got to spray this. I've got it pumped up to the pressure that I would be spraying at in the field. And I've got to spray this out and figure out how wide my spray pattern is. You have to figure this out because the calibration technique we uses 1/128th of an acre as our measurement distance to catch the water. So that's the distance where we walk. And so first off, what we have to do is figure out our distance. So to do that, you need to be on a hard surface. We picked a patch of dirt, which is not the best. Concrete works really well. So I've got this thing pumped up and I'm using just water, no pesticides in this at all. You don't want to use pesticides while you're calibrating. And I'm just going to spray it out here. And you can see that we get a pretty good idea of our spray width. Now, if I'm going to be walking and holding it higher, my spray width is going to be a lot wider, okay? So that's about where I want to have it when I'm walking in a field. Then what you do, you can see where you're spraying, where your spray is hitting. And what you want to do is come in here and get about 80% of what your width, that's your full width there. So just say 30 inches. So we'll do a little calculation real quick and just take 85% of that 30 inches, and that's going to be our sprayer width. What we'll do with that sprayer width is we'll look on this card and we'll move over to the trucks. We got all our stuff. We'll move over to look at the card and we'll measure off our distance and walk a certain distance. And that's the next step in getting our gallons of water we're putting out on a per acre basis. All right, so we did our measurement on our sprayer width, or our nozzle spray pattern width. We figured it to be 25.5. We rounded up to 26. We had a little bit of overspray anyway. So we took 26, and with using this card, we figured out that we needed to travel 157 feet. So I've got to mark off 157 feet in this field, come back, put the sprayer on just to give me a little bit of extra weight like it would be when I'm spraying. Grab my stopwatch, I'm gonna take off, time it, and then we'll finish the calibrations. So real quick, I'm gonna pace off my distance. I'll be back in just a second. Somebody needs to tell Bruce he needs to cut this hay. That's some pretty hay, but I'm gonna be itching for days. Now that we've got it, the distance measured off, which I would usually like to have like a little flag. This stuff's a little bit tall, my flags are all gone, so I use one of the tools I had in my truck box. Now I'm gonna get my sprayer on my back, and I'm going to walk that distance and time myself. What I will do is I'll time myself once on the way down, once on the way back. It's important, very important to keep your pace. you know, the same. Make sure my pace is pretty good. You know, everybody is going to have their own pace. You know, a lot of times what I do, I'm not going to do it here because it's pretty tall grass. A lot of times what I really do at the house is I walk as fast as I can so that I can put out as much product in one tank as possible. But we'll do the calculations. I'm going to walk it real quick. I'll be back in just a second. All right, that worked out perfect, like I planned it. All right, so it took 25.5 seconds for me to walk the distance that I marked for my calibration. The next thing I'm gonna do, if I can get this thing off my back, the next thing you have to do, the reason you timed yourself, is you wanted to see how long it would take you to spray that amount of material. That amount of material will be the amount of material you're spraying on 1/128th of an acre. And that we use that calculation because there's 128 ounces in a gallon. So the next thing I have to do, which is kind of hard to do with only 2 hands, and this graduated cylinder, I think that's what it's called, I can't remember now. It's been so long since I've been in chemistry, I forgot. Anyway, I think that's what it's called. What I usually like to use is a bucket. And you would think, me filming a show about calibrating sprayers, I would have brought a bucket to work today, or I could have found one. I can't find a bucket anywhere. So, what I've got to do is I've got to keep my pressure like I'm going to be when I'm spraying, and I've got to catch the water for the 25.5 seconds that it took me to walk that distance. So I'm going to do that real quick. And while I'm doing it, make sure you maintain pressure. That's one reason I like a backpack sprayer, is because you can maintain pressure. Those gallon, 2-gallon pump up sprayers that you have to keep putting on the ground and pumping up, they just aggravate me a lot. So I'm almost at 25 seconds. All right, 25 seconds. And what we have is milliliters. I don't know how to measure milliliters. So what I'm gonna do real quick is convert milliliters to ounces. So thanks to my new cameraman, Jacob, who's really good at this math stuff and pays attention really well in chemistry, he knew that it's 29.69 milliliters per fluid ounce. So he did the math real quick. We just rounded up. We got 630 milliliters. We divided by 30, we came up with 21 ounces. 21 ounces means that you're putting out, with that sprayer, at that pace, with that nozzle, you're putting out 21 gallons per acre. That's 21 gallons of water per acre. So if, this is where it gets crazy, and hopefully the formulas we're going to put up for you will help out, when, you know, help you see. If you're putting out 21 gallons per acre, and that's a 4-gallon sprayer, it's going to take you just a little bit over 5 sprayers to cover a complete acre. So you're going to take the 21 gallons, divide it by your 4 gallons you can hold in that sprayer, and that gives you, 5 plus a little bit. So when you're figuring out how to fill up a sprayer, if you would take your per acre rate and you would divide it by the five tanks it's going to take you to spray. So if you were putting out, if you said to put out 10 ounces per acre, you would divide it by 5 because it takes you 5 tanks to do it. That would be your per acre. So you put 2 ounces in that full tank. Then, if you were only going to fill the tank up with 1 gallon, you'd have to then again divide again. Hopefully that gives you the basics of how to calibrate. And like I said, we're going to put some formulas up on the board, on the screen for you to see. That will make this a lot easier. And I'll probably put a link to some. We'll have a link up at the end that'll take you to a place that can help you with calibration of these kind of sprayers. A couple things to consider when you are spraying. Hopefully you noticed while I was spraying that the pattern this tip was making. This is called a flat fan nozzle, which means it sprays in just a wall. It's a fan, and it's just a flat fan. There's all sorts of nozzles available that come with these sprayers. You got flood. If I can open this up, or just dump my bucket out, my spray tip bucket out. You've got, of course, these adjustable. They adjust to a cone. These are really good for different applications. One thing that's hard about these is as you adjust it, you open the orifice or you close the orifice. Every time you adjust it, you change how much water is being put out. So you would, calibrating a tip like this is very difficult. Now you start looking at these other tips, the flat fan nozzles like I have on that one. They're a lot easier to calibrate. They're not moving. There's no moving parts. The one thing you have to think about, you have to consider with these, and I don't know if we can get close enough for you to see, but we'll try. Let me see if I can get another one. This is newer. You're not gonna be able to see on this one either, but I'll get a little closer. If you can see this on this nozzle, it has a number. That's how it's rated. It's an 8004, and then VS is not that big important. That's just the company deal. The 80 is the angle that this thing sprays. What you're going to find most commonly is you're going to find an 80 or a 110. So 80 is a little bit less of an angle, 110 is a lot wider. The second two numbers, the 04, gives you the output. So you can have an 8004, 8005, you can have down to an 8001. The larger the number at the end, the bigger the droplet's going to be, and the more water you're going to be putting out. That's very important if you have a backpack sprayer or a boom sprayer. If you calibrate it using an 8004, and then you drop it down to an 8002 when you replace nozzles, you're going to be putting out a whole lot less water, so your calibration is going to be off. So what you need to do is if you do change nozzles, either keep the nozzle tips the same number, or you would have to recalibrate. You would do the same distance because your nozzle spacing is the same. If you're doing a boom, if you're doing a backpack, you're going to have to change your distance too, because if you change from say if you change from 80 to 110, your spray width is going to be a lot wider. Some other things to think about when you're looking at these spray tips. A plastic spray tip is going to wear out a lot more quickly than a metal spray tip. They have different ones. They have ceramic, they have brass, they have stainless steel, they have plastic. Not all of our chemicals are, clear liquids that spray easily. A lot of them are granular things that, will cause abrasions, and over time these things will wear out. So the amount of water you're putting out is going to actually change, usually increase. Another thing to consider when you are calibrating, and I just saw it over here somewhere. Oh, it's right here. It's very important too, when you're using a boom sprayer or a backpack, very important, make sure you have screens behind the nozzles. They keep the nozzles from clogging up, keep all big particles out. You can get these wherever you buy nozzle tips, and you can also keep them, get them clean, washed out, keep them clean so water's flowing, the same consistently. Another thing I wanted to talk about when spraying, I sprayed this when I sprayed my test area. A lot of times we're spraying on a per area basis, whether it's per acre, per 1,000 square feet. A lot of our labels will say, 1 tablespoon, 1 teaspoon, whatever, per gallon will cover 1,000 square feet. Sometimes we're just spraying a concentration. A lot of times we'll say like glyphosate, Roundup type products. It might say, we might be doing a percent solution, a 1% solution. And those products, you can use as just usually a non-selective herbicide to kill things, say in flower beds around trees and shrubs. And people worry about using a sprayer like this around the trees or shrubs and around things they want to keep. Well, I sprayed with high pressure because if I'm spraying a garden or if I'm spraying a field, we're going to spray with pretty high pressure to get it evenly distributed. If you're spraying around something like this, something desirable, I'm going to let a little pressure off to show. When I was spraying before, it was going everywhere. It was kind of billowing up. There's a little bit of a jet wash behind you could say. What you do when you're spraying, if you're going to be spraying around trees and shrubs and bushes, you can see this pattern here. It's a lot bigger droplet, not quite as wide, but you can also see it's not going to be drifting. It's not going to be splashing. It's not going to be blowing up on everything. So when you're spraying around things you want to protect, if you can lower your pressure, get your hand off the pump, don't pump it up as much, that'll help out too. That'll help protect a lot of the things that you want to keep, even where you are spraying things that might normally kill them if you spray it over the top. All right, so we quickly covered some pesticide safety tips in the beginning, and then we hit on sprayer calibration. If you need more in-depth, sprayer calibration help, if you need your sprayer calibrated, definitely give us a call. We can walk you through it, or possibly come out to the farm or to your house and help you with it, help you set it up for what you're trying to accomplish. You know, and one thing I didn't talk about, but sometimes, you know, sometimes you might want to use a different nozzle for different things. So, you know, you might even have your sprayers calibrated with 2 different nozzles, just have it written down somewhere so you remember exactly how much you put out with that sprayer and that spray tip. Another thing I wanted to touch on real quick, just some timely tips, some things that I was thinking about as we were getting ready for the show. First off, you know, you saw me walk through this beautiful hayfield. I'd hate to see this beautiful hayfield get eaten up by armyworms. So everybody that's got grass, money invested in grass, forages for their animals, or if you got a bird field that's got brown top millet in it, that's probably the first place they're going to go. So be looking for armyworms. They're out and about right now. I haven't seen an outbreak of them yet. I've seen plenty of them around, but they've been pretty sporadic. But definitely, as we get into August here, I'd be definitely looking for them to protect what you've got here in money-wise in this field. The other thing is, if you're anywhere, if you just fertilized, just cut a hayfield, be looking out for damage like this. This is the Bermuda grass stem maggot damage. You can tell that because you can take this growing point and pull it right out of that plant. The maggot burrows in there, we've talked about it before, but they're out, they're everywhere. So if you're working on your 3rd or your 4th cutting, most likely you're gonna have to spray something. Most of the approved pyrethroids that are approved for armyworms are also approved for the stem maggot. They work really well. What we tell people, if you know, without scouting, what we would do is 10 days after fertilizing, after a cutting, 10 days after fertilizing, spray for the fly, and then again 7 to 10 days later, and that should get you through to the end of your cutting. Some other things, you know, thinking about deer season getting pretty close. Now's a great time to be, one, you know, feeding a little bit, putting some attractant out so you can maybe see what kind of deer are on your property and where they are. The other thing you really need to think about doing right now is go ahead and getting all these summer annual weeds killed. Spray a non-selective herbicide like glyphosate, kill them off, get them dead well ahead of your planting. We're not too terribly far away from, you know, September, where we can start planting some of our fall food plot stuff. But get that, I mean, you're gonna have plenty of growth this year from all the rains. Get all of that killed off so that when you go to plant in September, end of August, you know, you've got plenty of soil moisture there to work with, that you're not fighting, you know, a bunch of weeds that are competing for that moisture, sucking that moisture up. Let them go ahead and be, you know, give them 2, 3, 4 weeks to dry down, get out of your way before you get out there and start trying to plant your food plot. That'll make your food plot that much more successful and make it come out of the ground that much quicker, less competition, and you can get you a good food plot early. That's about all I can think about right now for now. So, you know, as always, I like to always end by saying, you know, if you've got ideas, you've got, you know, things you want to see, some things you want me to talk about, definitely, you know, give me a call, shoot me an email, and, you know, we'll try and do something, you know, with your topic on the air. But right now, we're gonna head over to the Cotton Gin Cafe, where the cooks over there always take care of me. I would just ask that maybe next time I could get a few more tater tots on my plate. That's all I'm asking. As always, I'm Jeff Cook. This is Backyard Basics, where we're filmed in your backyard.